if you just want to hire him, just move on. But if you gotta go through the interviews, then
What? I like it.
Danielle joined the meeting.
Lelia. Moa Echingon Saratan Kaipani or Wow. Wow Bankupurana Nilap. Wow Naki Lapalapkan Koros, Belian Chiak, Momotso or government. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As is customary in my culture, after the sound of the sokoma and the serving of the first 4 cups of sakau, the one to open up this space usually connects themselves to everybody in the room and to this place. And I'm going to attempt to do that through poetry. Kasalelia, my name is Carolann Carl, and home for me is the beautiful island of Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia. Pohnpei, one state of 4 that make up one island nation, beautiful islands where people come to dive, surf, and hike on their vacation. One nation of 5 that make up the entire Micronesian region. Give me a moment, let me try to clear the common misconceptions. We have the Yapis, the Quashayan, the Pohnpeian, the Chukis. The Federated States of Micronesia is just one country. You see, we have the Marshall Islands to the east and Palau to the west. We are the COFA migrants, Hawaii's newest wave of immigrants. Down south, we have Nauru and Kiribati at the end. Up north, we have the Northern Marianas and Guam, where America's day begins. Yes, the Marianas are not island nations, they're US territories, but in Micronesian waters, they are a part of our inventory. So although I feel hesitant, I will claim them in my story. Because for too long have we been claimed by foreign powers that we have forgotten who we are. Vast stretches of ocean meant to connect us, now making us seem too far. Sometimes it is forgotten that we are one region of 3, Melanesia, Micronesia, Polynesia, Pacific Island beauty. Shh. We have been shushed by foreign labels, Pacific Islands, they say. But when foreigners say Pacific, do they really understand my way? I come from the island of Pohnpei, where on the other side of yesterday, across the oceans of Oceania, my ancestors would navigate. On the other side of yesterday, my ancestors had a vision of a new place they could call home. The lagoon of life, an island risen, a crew of 15 members, 9 women and 6 men. I speak their names to life in need of their guiding presence. Sutakono Peranu and the prophet Sapkani, Lang Peren Sopelata and his brother Sopelati. The 9 women were Liolele, Lian Kachao Chuk, Lioromen Puel, Lupok Takalang, Litorkani, Lisapkani, Lipalkani, Lumuechu, Lisaramen Puel. A canoe handcrafted by pivotal women whose presence, as the story goes, would conjure wind for the voyage. Even on my own life's journey, these women are the seed of my strength, my courage. Along their voyage, an octopus would point them in the direction they seek. Lo and behold, they found an exposed reef, and here they stacked rocks to build an altar in praise. Upon a stone altar is the literal translation of my island's name, Pohnpei. For upon that stone altar, my island was built so that more people could voyage to it and navigate more still. The clans came later, calling this island their home, embedding themselves deeply rooted in stone for at least 2,000 years. My culture has thrived. Despite decades of foreign power, my culture is still alive. I walk through megalithic structures. I pay tribute to chiefs, chiak, wow, sor, traditional concepts the English language fails to describe because of its ambiguity. I tell you the origin story of my island because here I want to make something irrevocably clear. My ancestors were navigators. As you've heard this story go. As such, we claim ocean and island as contiguous homes. We claim the identity of navigator and along with it, the identity of immigrant. Although I travel by airplane today, I feel the same turbulence. Growing up a Pohnpei and being a navigator was more than just being able to read stars. Being a navigator is about welcoming everyone who travels from near and or far. Pohnpei My island is a place for those who come. It does not matter the color of your skin or what language rolls off your tongue. We are navigators, we are immigrants, we are Oceanians, we are one. Whether you come to stay or just temporarily, we are obligated to treat you customarily with unsolicited respect, humility, and generosity. That is what being a navigator, a Pohnpeian that travels, means to me. If I could, I would have stayed home to pursue a higher degree, but because of the systems imposed on my island, here is where I find the opportunity. If I could, I would have stayed home. Rather than being bombarded by such negativity, hearing even government officials say, my country is so bad, we choose to come here because being homeless in Hawaii is better than being rich in Micronesia. Really? Home for me is the beautiful island of Pohnpei, where ever since the other side of yesterday, immigrant has been my identity because navigation has been my way. My land, my language, my culture, my heritage is my identity. It is not negligence of one. This is what it means to be from where I come from. Kan roroki irapensap o batbatok batapensap sarawi. Be stewards of the land and passionately breathe life into our oral history. Home for me is the beautiful island of Pohnpei, an island built on an altar of stone. Come to all of Micronesia, where you will be welcomed with open arms because just like our ancestors, you come to find home. Kalangan. Welcome everybody this morning to this space where we will together be trying to understand the upstream. How does the Compact of Free Association affect social determinants of health for Federated States of Micronesia migrants in Hawaii? Today, our host is the Mapuna Lab. And in this lab, what we try to do, and one of the gifts that I believe that we have, is really our diversity in the amounts of cultures that we see today. Thank you, Auntie Jackie. Because we have cultures from across the Pacific and across the Pacific Basin, one of our strengths is that we get to self-express those cultures. And by doing so, we create a space where each of our lab members feel safe and vulnerable enough to not only participate in the cultures of the other members, but also to dive deeper into their own identities and help each other return to our source. And we hope today, with everything that we share, that we get to help each and every one of you return to your sources and find those strengths so that we can all better serve our communities here in Hawaii or wherever you're calling in from. Before we get into it, I want us all to begin to start by thinking about the title of this webinar series, Hānai Ahu, to feed or nourish the altar. As you all heard in my poem, the name of my island, Pohnpei, literally translated means upon a stone altar. The word for ahu in my language is bay, and pon, as in Pohnpei, means upon. So when I think about what it means to nourish the altar, I think about coming from home. Because the island was built on a stone altar, meaning every single one of us lives and is born off of it, that I think about myself as an offering wherever I travel to in this world. And I hope that today, the offerings that I bring through this webinar help you and everyone here better serve all of our communities. Our learning objectives for today are, we will be engaging in an immersive learning experience and learn how understanding the upstream fits into SAMHSA's working definition of recovery and the Ahupuaʻa model. Learning objective 2, we will learn to identify the barriers to substance use prevention and care that acculturation can create for FSM COFA migrants in Hawaii using the Ahupuaʻa model. And third, we will understand how to utilize the Ahupuaʻa model to improve health services access for FSM COFA migrants. In our agenda for today, first we will begin with our consent to deepen. Then we will hear about the Ahupuaʻa conceptualization by Papaʻolelo Kahi. We will also look at the SAMHSA recovery model, a political map of the Pacific, and help each other find Micronesia, a brief overview of COFA, the Compact of Free Association, and risk factors. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to look at the Constitutional Convention that recently occurred and the protective factors that come with sovereignty and self-determination. So we begin with the consent to deepen, because we understand that we do hold vulnerable spaces, and we ask that if you cannot be here fully with all of your ancestral memory and knowledge and bear witness to this vulnerability, then we want you to understand that that's okay. And if you need to step away from this space, this is the time to do so. Even if you do decide to step away because you don't feel comfortable being as vulnerable with us as you can be, you will still receive the recording of this webinar for you to view later. So I'll give folks about 15 seconds to determine whether they do give consent or not. Beautiful. And now I'm going to invite Lilinoe to share about the Ahupuaʻa conceptualization model.
Ahahea ke ia nola ina ohana. Ua mai ole o ka aina malie. Ahena ni vale no I ka makaloha. Eia kahile oe. E pane mai hoʻi la. Aloha e, aloha e. Aloha e. Aloha, mahalo nui, Carolann. I just want to mahalo you for that beautiful opening. Your love for your home and your people is very much felt, very, very much felt. Mahalo for that. I am here representing two of the partner hosts of this series, Papaʻolelo Kahi and the Ohana Center of Excellence. My name is Lilinoe Kauahikaua, and I serve as the project manager for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Ohana Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health. We are a national organization, or a national initiative, and one of the partners is Papaʻolelo Kahi, which is my regular job. I shared the website in the chat, and our home screen is up on the screen right now. We are a source of empowerment, education, and support for those who are seeking behavioral health care. We provide a holistic and cultural approaches to serving the needs of the communities that we represent. We provide technical assistance, education, training, workshops, and we are in the process of building an online repository of searchable resources that will serve Kanaka and Pacific Islanders no matter where they live, in Hawaii, US Socio-Pacific Islands, the continental US, or all the way to Puerto Rico and the US Virgin Islands. So we have a very large service area, and please check us out. We have regional steering committees and all kinds of ways for folks to get involved. Next slide, please. And then my regular job is I serve as a program coordinator for projects involving substance use and mental health for Papaʻolelo Kahi, which is the Native Hawaiian Health Board. and specifically focusing on cultural approaches in those areas. And so if you're not familiar with Papola Lokahi, we are, again, the Native Hawaiian Health Board. We were created out of the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Improvement Act that was passed back in the 80s by Congress. Our mandate is to raise the health status of Native Hawaiians to the highest possible level. Next slide, please. We oversee the 5 Native Hawaiian healthcare systems. There's one on each island. We also have a Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program, and we house the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander 3R COVID response team as well. Next slide. And so I'm going to share a little bit about the Ahupuaʻa model that Carolann mentioned. I'm going to do it kind of a condensed version because I want to make sure there's enough time to get to all of the incredible content that Carolann has put together for everyone today. And so just a little bit of preface, this is a illustration of the Hawaiian worldview, which illustrates the reciprocal connections that Kanaka have with spirituality and the land. And this is something that we see kind of reverberate throughout the Pacific, right? That reciprocal relationship that we have to our spirituality and then again to the land as well. So prior to European contact, our people had this understanding of this reciprocal relationship with Western influence and colonization, and created this imbalance in our family system, shifted paradigms within our peoples. Next slide, please. And so the way that this shifted, or this imbalance kind of manifests within our people today is consistently overrepresentation within a lot of different social service areas, including addiction services, substance use treatment services, mental health, as well as incarceration. Next slide. And so some of the framing that we use to embark on this work comes to us from a report called Imi Kiolamau. And I won't go through all of the quotes, but this was a real visioning project that our kupuna laid out for us, a real nice roadmap that we can follow. And as we see in many other projects, when the funding runs out, often the work also gets put to the side. And so we've tried to work to revive all of this work that our kupuna had put into creating this roadmap for us to follow in creating culturally resonant care for our people, for both substance use and mental health. And the visioning process here really illustrates the bond that we have with the land, that really deep bond as a family member. And so it highlights and illustrates for us within a Western system that advocates for the need for that as part of our healing, the need for that connection to land, to connect to the kai, the vai, all of our freshwater sources, all of the different areas within our land that keeps us full and happy and healthy and grounded as a people. Next slide. And so just briefly a little bit about the Ahupuaʻa model. This was a model that was influenced by White Bison and their healing forest model, as well as the social and cultural determinants of health, which was developed by Dr. Keawe Koho'okula. And you'll see that depicted on the screen there on the bottom right. And then the artist for the illustration there is Kimo'opaka, is a Native Hawaiian artist from Hawaiʻi Island. And so the mana'o behind this framework is really something that we put forth in order to show, we've taken the social and cultural determinants of health and kind of symbolically shown them in the brain system to show the cyclical transmission that happens with these social and cultural determinants of health and how it impacts all of the systems. And if you're not familiar with the Ahupuaʻa, it is a land division that was from the mountain to the sea. And these are land divisions, are systems that are still very much in existing today. And so the cyclical transmission is shown through the water, through the rain. So you can see how it flows through each interconnected system within the Ahupuaʻa, because the health of one system within the Ahupuaʻa impacts the health of the next system, since they're all connected to one another. So if we have one unhealthy system or a sickness getting in somewhere along the way there, it starts to impact and infect and impact the health of each system. And so with the rain, right, it's going through our, it's falling down, it's going into the Kahavai, the river systems, into the soil. It's making unhealthy soil, which you'll see there. It's creating these layers that are then washed down into the other systems through the river, through the lo'i, down into the lokoi'a. It's all kind of connected down into the ocean, where it gets evaporated back up and then goes back into the sky and falls down as rain once again. So the mana'o behind this here, as you see on the left-hand side, you have our risk factors. And as they infiltrate our systems, they create these layers of unhealthy soil that are, that's our eha, our pain, our anger, our fear, our guilt and shame. That is the response to a lot of those risk factors that come down, all of the traumas, both intergenerational and within our lifetimes. They create this unhealthy soil that then our next generation of people are going to puka out of or emerge out of. And this is looking at the kalo basically as a reflection of ourselves that begins to then puka out of this unhealthy soil. And so when we have generations of our people that are coming through this unhealthy soil, they carry that eha with them down deep. And sometimes they may not even really know that it's there. But once it starts to kind of bubble to the surface, it starts to manifest. And some of the symptoms that we see today, like substance use, mental health, suicide, other issues like that, are the surface manifestations, right? That's what we can see on the surface. But we have to look down deeper. How is that getting in, right? How is that eha being transmitted? How is it manifesting within that person, and how is it getting in? So that's kind of what this system aims to do. And we take a moment and look, maybe like zoom in on the lo'i as being one particular system within this larger system, right? And how is, what does this look like on that individual micro level, right? So say we have one kalo that's sick, right? We have to kind of look around at the other kalo to see, are these other kalos sick, or is the whole lo'i sick? How is that sickness getting in? So this is that moment we have to look for that root. We have to look up all the water systems, up all the different interconnected lo'i, going all the way up the mountain to see, like, how is this sickness getting in? And if we can't find it, and we just instead decide, okay, you know what, I can't figure it out, I'm just gonna take this kalo, I'm gonna heal it, and I'm gonna put it back. That kalo is just gonna get sick again because we haven't taken the time to heal the rest of that environment. And we can look at that as ourselves, our ohana, our communities, even our care systems, right? Even our state systems, if we look more on a macro level. So this is very reflective of all of the different spaces that we see ourselves in. And then, but one thing we really want to remember as well is that in addition to our risk factors that are passed down, our ancestors have passed on incredible protective and resiliency factors, especially within our culture. That is what is passed down, which is always with us, right? And it impacts our systems in a similar way. But sometimes our risk factors are they're just louder. They're more in your face, right? The pain sometimes takes all the space out. So with this model, what we've tried to do is bring it into spaces to show how our cultural life ways need to be supported in order to keep our people healthy and safe. And so whereas many times our cultural interventions, our cultural life ways have to fit into different Western boxes in order to be accepted, we don't want to have to do that, right? We want to have a system that's supportive of the way that we understand the world, the way that we interact with one another, and what we know to be true about how we need to heal and how we need to stay healthy. So you'll see on the right-hand side are protective factors, and as they wash through the systems, they create layers of healthy soil of our lokahi, our balance, our mauliola, our optimal health, our mana, our spiritual power, our pilina, our connections. Those are important parts of ourselves. And then we have our happy, healthy kalo that then emerge from that soil. Next slide. And so if you want to, actually I'll put in the chat some resources that you can read more. We put this model forth to within the ADAD state plan, alcohol drug abuse state plan, as a way to reconceptualize what care for Native Hawaiians looks like in Hawaii. But extending this, one thing I love about this model is that I found it to be very resonant with peoples across the Pacific. We are all very much people who connect to land as a member of our family, as an essential part of our own health and healing. So I invite you to look more into it, and I'll put those links in the chat, and I want to turn it back over to Carolann.
Mahalo, Lilinoe. That was beautifully done. I'm going to ask that we go to the slide about the first 4 cups. There we are. Thank you. So today when we opened up, you got to hear the sounds after the classical music. You heard the sound of sokoma, and that the pounding of those rocks is the opening sound to a Sakau ceremony where I'm from in Pohnpei. Sakau is a Pohnpeian iteration of Ava. The main difference, though we use the same plant, whereas Ava uses water as its solvent, we use hibiscus sap. And so it's a little bit more potent because of the extraction ratios. But the first 4 cups in that ceremony are usually given to the people with the highest titles in this space. And because I can't give you the cups physically, I'm going to ask that we think of these first 4 cups of the ceremony as our cups of wisdom, knowledge, and reflection to internalize today. And here's what those 4 cups will symbolize. The first 2 are going to come from SAMHSA's working definition of recovery and the 12 core functions of a substance abuse counselor. Both of these roles incorporate all of these different things, and we're going to be focusing on very specific parts today. The first cup that I want us to be thinking about is how recovery is relational. As we look at the compacts of free association, I want you to really think about the relationships that come out of that mutual bilateral agreement between the US government and my country. In the second cup, I want you to be thinking about the different strengths and responsibilities that you can pull from as an individual, or that you can pool around the people that you serve in their families or their communities. What are the roles that they can play here in Hawaii or in all of the different communities that we all serve? Our third cup comes directly from the upstream in the Ahupuaʻa model. And I want you to think about the risk factors that surface as a result of the history of the Compact of Free Association. And in our fourth cup is going to be the protective and resiliency factors that come from that upstream. How can we continue to empower folks to lean into their community and environment, their Ohana relationships and support, and all of these other protective and resiliency factors that we need as communities? So before we move forward, a few definitions to keep in mind that are very specific to this webinar, because the word Micronesia gets thrown around a lot, but for different spaces and places, it means different things. Here in this space, I'm strictly referring to the US affiliated islands: Guam, the Northern Marianas, Palau, Marshall Islands, Pohnpei, Yap, Chuuk, and Koshai. Kiribati and Nauru aren't mentioned today because they are affiliated with the UK. And the second definition is free association. We're talking about the political relationship, the forming of a political alliance without any constraints or external restriction. So first, let's figure out where Micronesia is on a map. If we look at this map, we see the three regions of the Pacific: Polynesia, Melanesia, and Micronesia. Micronesia is right up there in the Northwest. There have been a lot of spaces I've been in where we've been referred to as being a part of the South Pacific, but we don't exist below the equator. We exist above it. So we are the Northwest. So now let's get into a brief overview of the Compact of Free Association and the freely associated states. Again, the cup that you should be thinking about right now is the relationships and the social networks that come as a product of this. Let's take a step back in time for a minute, because I really need to provide context. The region of Micronesia faced 4 major periods of imposed colonial administration. It was the Spanish, the German, the Japanese, and now the US. The Japanese annexed Micronesia as ordered by the League of Nations and administered us colonially under the South Seas Mandate between 1914 to 1945, all the way up until World War II. Survivors of World War II, Micronesian survivors of World War II and the Japanese occupation describe it as brutal. There was infliction of cruel punishment, land appropriation, slave labor, unwarranted execution, forced prostitution, and countless massacre of innocent lives. For a long time, we lived under a colonial rule that suppressed our ability to practice culture and to practice all of the things that we knew kept us safe. And this is very recent history. My great-grandfather was actually almost executed because he tried to provide food to the Catholic priests and nuns that lived in the area, because during World War II, all of the food was strictly only for Japanese soldiers and was taken away from the islanders themselves. Because Japan had this footing in Micronesia deep into the Pacific, that's why they had the ability to attack Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 1941. In retaliation to that, when the US joined World War II, they then came through the region and bombed all of the Japanese installations, fleets, airports, and other main installations that existed across the region, from the Marshall Islands to Pohnpei, Chuuk, Yap, and even Saipan in the Northern Marianas. The most well-known bombing that the US did on these Japanese installations was on Chuuk Harbor, called Operation Hailstone, and occurred on February 17th of 1944. And once the US was able to establish their footing in the region and build their own military installations, that is when they were able to launch the atomic bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in August of 1945. And those bombs were launched from an airfield in Tinian in the Northern Mariana Islands in Micronesia. And so after the Japanese left, a lot of the Micronesian population felt liberated from that cruel administration. It was so bad that when the US came in and quote unquote liberated us, now we have holiday. Each of the districts have holidays to separate that. The Northern Marianas just celebrated their Liberation Day last week on July 4th. And in Pohnpei, where I'm from, we celebrate Liberation Day on September 11th of every year, to honor the fact that we were able to survive that colonial administration. When the US came in, we wanted to use that opportunity to rebuild and contemplate what our political future would look like, having been wards of many nations. While we were doing that, fully thinking that the US would support us, their plans were a little bit different and focused on their own priorities. They wanted to acquire the islands for military strategic purposes so that Pearl Harbor wouldn't happen to US land again. And so they negotiated with the United Nations to create what was then the US Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, which gave them exclusive free hands to our land, ocean, and air. So they prioritized creating the nuclear testing sites in the Marshall Islands and created a CIA training camp in Saipan. Everything that happened in the region at that time had to go through the US Pentagon. They imposed a political wall of silence around the region, and any engagement between Micronesia and the outside world had to be approved by them first. We're going to play this video from the Reagan administration from that time, welcoming us into the compact before we get into the compact.
Zeter, President Reagan's personal representative. It's my great honor and privilege to present the President of the United States of America.
Greetings on this historic occasion to our friends in Micronesia. For many years, a very special relationship has existed between the United States and the people of the Trust Territory. Under the trusteeship, we've come to know and respect you as members of our American family. And now, as happens to all families, members grow up and leave home. I want you to know that we wish you all the best as you assume full responsibility for your domestic affairs and foreign relations. As you chart your own course for economic development and as you take up your new status in the world as a sovereign nation, we look forward to continuing our close relationship with you in your new status. But you'll always be family to us. Over the years, perhaps the most lasting and valuable things we've built together are not the roads, the airports, the schools and hospitals, but rather an understanding of the meaning of democracy and freedom and the dignity of self-determination. You've built a strong foundation for your future. Together, in free association, we can and will build a better life for all. Thank you, and congratulations.
It's also important to note that what once was the nuclear testing site in the Marshall Islands is now named the Ronald Reagan Ballistic Missile Defense Test Site. All in all, what we all should focus on is that the US had an obligation to the United Nations to support the development of Micronesia. Reagan mentions long-lasting roads, airports, schools, and hospitals, but if they were as long-lasting as he had said back in those years, I would not have to be here today to go to a four-year institution and achieve my degree. A lot of members in the community today would not have to travel here to get healthcare, to get education, or to find opportunities to help them thrive in the introduced cash economy. And it was all, as Hawaii knows far too well, it was all by design. Back in those days, the US had tasked a man named Anthony Solomon, who was then a professor of Harvard Business School, to survey the Micronesian islands and draw up a master plan for development, which would realize and focus on US political goals in Micronesia. If you want to read the Solomon Report, you can actually access it through UH Manoa's Hamilton Library in the Pacific Special Collections. And it's entitled America's Ruthless Blueprint for the Assimilation of Micronesia. Thank you. And we knew what was going on. Our leaders knew what was going on. Our forefathers did. As you can see from this New York Times article that was published in 1971, entitled Micronesian Nationalists Accuse US of Plan to Keep Islands, because it was true. And because of the leadership and the foresight of our forefathers, they on their own accord created what was then the Congress of Micronesia. I need to explained that the Congress of Micronesia at the time was not just Pohnpei, Yap, Chuuk, and Pashai. It also included the Marshall Islands, Palau, and the Northern Marianas. All of them together met in 1975 in Saipan to draft the Constitution of the Federated States of Micronesia. Had we been given the opportunity to truly self-determine our political future, the Federated States of Micronesia today would be the entire region that we're talking about. But because of split negotiations that the US did, convincing everyone that they had different priorities, which at the time was true because the nuclear testing sites did exist in the Marshall Islands and their priorities were health. So under the leadership of Amata Kapua, they decided that they needed to be their own separate country and became the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Because Saipan and the Northern Marianas was so close to Guam, which had been a US territory since the early 1900s, they had already been accustomed to the cash economy because they had been already taken off of their ranches. And so it made sense for them to accept Commonwealth status and become the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And this was the same for all of the different island groupings. So by 1979, when the FSM Constitution was ratified, there were only 4 districts left to ratify it: Pohnpei, Yap, Chug, and Coshaway. So now that we understand that background, what is the Compact of Free Association? I'm actually going to do a time check now, because I know a lot of you need to hop out of here at 11. I'm estimating that we may go over for 15 to 20 minutes. If you have to leave when the time hits 11, that's totally fine. This entire recording will be made available to you. So please don't feel pressured to stay if you have to leave when the clock hits 11. There's just a lot of really great information in here, and I could cut it short, but I really want you all to be able to access this later in the recording. So going back to the slides, as defined by definition, the Compact of Free Association is an international bilateral agreement establishing and governing the relationship of free association between the United States and a Micronesian sovereign state. Not only do we benefit from the Compact of Free Association, but so does the US. The same migration benefits that we get coming here for work, labor, and school for an undelineated amount of time, so do US citizens when they come into our countries. There exists not 1, but 3 compacts of free association. There exists one between the US and the Republic of Palau, one between the US and the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and one between the US and the Federated States of Micronesia, which we will be focusing on today. Each of these compacts, just like each of the constitutions that come with these sovereign states, are distinct in their priorities and the benefits outlined and negotiated by their governments. Next slide, please. The compact between the FSM and the US can be summarized by 2 major agreements. There are 4 in total, but there are 2 that really are important to the discussions today. The first is the subsidiary agreement, which outlines the economic relations between the US and the FSM, which states that the US will provide the FSM with annual financial assistance in the following sectors: education, healthcare, private sector development, the environment, public sector capacity building, and public infrastructure. Along with that, the US will also help us establish a trust fund to be saved and used only when the annual financial assistance is terminated. Emphasis on the when the annual financial assistance is terminated. The last time I checked the trust fund numbers, the best source that I could get in 2018 said that the trust fund was short $600 million back then. So I'm not sure how short it is today. The second major agreement is the tertiary agreement, the most important agreement to the US, which outlines security and defense relations. It gives the US full authority and responsibility for security and defense matters in or relating to my country. It gives the US responsibility and authority over our land, water, and airspace as needed to conduct activities necessary for security and defense. The thing about Title III is that extending into Title V, Section 352, it states that this agreement, the tertiary agreement, can stay in effect after the termination of the compact. This agreement can only be terminated if there is mutual agreement between the US and the FSM to do so. So even if we wanted to end the compact and create relationships with anybody else of our own accord, we could only do that if the US agreed to end it with us. And thirdly, if the tertiary agreement is terminated, then the subsidiary agreement is terminated completely. So if we do not allow the US security and defense relations, that type of military strategic authority over our land, air, and water, then they revoke themselves of their obligations to help us become an independent country. Next slide, please. And so this is what trickles down into the risk factors that we see prevalent in the community, in the Micronesian communities we serve today. We see the historical, cultural, and intergenerational trauma caused by the history leading up to the compact and as a result of the compact itself. As I stated, although Ronald Reagan may have said that they had built all of these schools, the hospitals, and the roads, and though that may be true, if the plan was as succinct and as efficient as it should have been, me and my community would not have to be here, because we would have the schools and the hospitals and the private sector and public sector jobs so that we didn't have to come here for those opportunities. And so as a result of that displacement, we undergo criminalization of Native identity, discrimination, and racial trauma, all of the effects of colonization, and all of the other risk factors you see here. Next slide, please. And it's documented. This is not something that we can simply hide from. It's right in our face most of the time, and a lot of the times reported by Civil Beat and their Micronesian reporters there. And so you can see the struggle that we face, not just because of the discrimination, but because of the federal policies that even take away our rights to certain benefits, including healthcare, including FEMA aid, that create barriers that prevent us from striving in places like Hawaii, where we come to find the resources that we are supposed to get in exchange for our land, air, and sea, and for the security that our 2 million square kilometers of ocean provides the US. Next slide, please. And this isn't just in Hawaii. This is across the US, whether it's in Minnesota or in Washington or in Oregon, or even in Guam and in the Northern Marianas. The story of Micronesian immigration is the story of many immigrant communities that have come to the US and the barriers that we face. Next slide, please. And now we're gonna take a break. This break is going to go into our 11 a.m. finish mark. So please, if you need to go, that is totally fine. We will see you again in our next webinar. But if you do decide to stay, thank you. The recording will be available for everybody. To lead us into our break, I'm going to invite Jack to please come and help us with the word search.
Absolutely. Okay, so hello everyone. So at the top of your screen, you should see a green bar that says you are viewing the Annalise screen. Right next to it, there's like a little gray bar that says view options. You can click on that and then go all the way down to the bottom, right below exit full screen and above mute the Annalise computer sound. There's a button that says annotate. And so if you click on that, then you can draw on the screen. And so basically what that lets us do right now is the word search. So feel free to go ahead and start working on the word search during the break. Thank you.
What up? This your boy Yasamana. Wrong seconds when I get on come out them yes. Ramazel. Gonna JB ready for this. It's all I see again with Marshall Island. Yeah, man. Testing mic. There we go. Yo, Joy. Come on and step out on Meg and tell them what's up, y'all.
I got roots deeper than the sea. Come take a ride and you will see I'm from that 692. No other place I'd rather be. Let's take it slow now. All my island people drop it to the flow now. Turn me up cause here we go. Said I'ma take you to an island where tradition never die. Where there's love everywhere like it's falling from the sky. Singing ain't it mine. Still digging in with our mind. Let me take you to my roots. Take you to my island. I'm talking palm trees, beautiful horizon, sunshine and blue skies. We vibing. 692, yeah, that's my island. Let me Let me take you to my roots, take you to my island. I'm talking palm tree, beautiful horizon, sunshine and blue skies, we vibing. 692, yeah, that's mine. Let me take you to my roots, take you to my island. I'm talking palm tree, beautiful horizon, sunshine and blue skies, we vibing. 692, yeah, that's mine.
Mama Masa, iso siga yari kimru tolang ana jere bisi mani dikini besora sendru toro mani kina esala moran. Iso waran jero ramani chuche para sela kinu tara mesi nailen kina ramani rio. Ona oye man, rally grada chain, esel oxygen, annual pilot cane, Marshall Island.
Let me take you to my roots, take you to my island. I'm talking palm tree, beautiful horizon, sunshine and blue skies, we vibing. 692, yeah, that's mine. Let me take you to my roots, take you to my island. I'm talking palm tree, beautiful horizon, sunshine and blue skies, we vibing. 692, yeah, that's mine.
All right, that was a great break. Thank you all so much for joining in our word search. Look at that. We almost got everything, but thank you all for participating. We're gonna clear the word search. This will also be in the slide deck when you get it. So if you want to do more, you can totally finish it up. You can even print it out and give it to your kids if you wanted to. But going back into, before we get into the topic of self-determination and the FSM Constitutional Convention, one of the things that I really wanted to also, there's so many things I'm emphasizing today, but another thing that I wanted to emphasize is that in terms of immigration under the compact, there are only 3 things that COFA migrants can come here for and live here for. That's education, work, and healthcare. What happened with this colonial administration is, and I like to think of, I don't know if anyone's ever read Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, but he has this really great metaphor to think about the ways that in this case, the compact was created. And if you all know the saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. As fair as it was, the US did give us a fish and they did teach us how to fish, but without the proper schools and the hospitals and without a proper public or private sector running, we were never given a fishing pole. All of our indigenous practices, the fishing nets, all of the different ways we know how to catch fish and to provide for ourselves were substituted. We were taught, we were fed, but we weren't given that fishing pole. And I hope today we learn together how to reclaim that fishing pole for ourselves. And so now we're going to talk about what that looks like through self-determination and the FSM Constitutional Convention. Just like individuals, self-determination can only happen after basic needs are met. And in this case, that is housing, that is education, that is healthcare. As many of you have come across in your line of work, people cannot advocate for themselves until these needs are met. Next slide, please. And so now we're going to look at the strengths and responsibilities involved in recovery, whether that comes from the individual, the family, or the community. Next slide, please. The thing about the compacts is that it's an agreement between federal governments. So all of the negotiations happen up here, and it falls on the shoulders of the states. whether that's Hawaii here in the Hawaii, Washington, or Oregon, or Arkansas here in the US, or it's the states back home. All of the burden of the compacts fall on Pohnpei, Yap, Chuk, and Koshai. Next slide, please. So how do we obtain the fishing pole, and how do FSM states try to reclaim their power and their resources? Just last week, Tuesday, on July 4th, while Saipan was celebrating their Liberation Day, the Federated States of Micronesia held its 4th Constitutional Convention. Although states cannot negotiate the compact, what they can do is ensure that their constitutions recognize the priorities of Micronesia because we are sovereign states. That means that the Constitution, as the supreme law of the country, as a document that is recognized internationally, will and forever supersede the compact. Next slide, please. In the most recent Constitutional Convention, these were the amendments that people were asked to look over and vote for. Dual citizenship, which would allow FSM citizens to be a citizen of another country, especially the US, because of the Compact Treaty. Citizenship in the FSM works differently than a lot of places in the world, where unlike the US, where if you are born here on this soil, you are a US citizen. In where I come from, it can only be passed down through your parentage. Our forefathers literally codified genetic DNA and heritage into our Constitution, saying that you are only an FSM citizen if either of your parents is one. So even if I'm born in the US and I'm born of FSM citizen parents, I am an FSM citizen. Even if my parents have me in Japan or Australia or anywhere in the world, when I'm born, when I take my first breath, I am an FSM citizen because of my parents. Switch that around, if you're a US citizen who works in the FSM and you have kids there, your children cannot be born FSM citizens. They're born FSM nationals, simply because you are not an FSM citizen. That is not your heritage. And so citizenship really is a birthright. And because so many of us have begun to migrate and move out into the US, our kids have until, by their 18th birthday, they have until they're 21 to affirm their citizenship status as FSM citizens. Because of the huge disconnect, so many kids have lost that opportunity completely because they don't know how to navigate the system, because their parents aren't even aware of how this system works, and because they truly believe that life would be more beneficial in the US. And so one of the things that our forefathers could never foresee is the amount of people who would migrate out and whose kids would eventually become citizens of other countries. And this is why dual citizenship was one of the most controversial issues in this past Constitutional Convention. We also have other amendments giving resources directly back to the states, whether that's fishery fees, which used to only go to the national government. Now we're advocating for some of that money to go to the states, because when the states have power, their constituents have power, and their constituents are better equipped to come out into places like the US and ensure that they know their rights and their responsibilities, can step into their kuleana as people of this, as citizens of the land that feed them. Next slide, please. And so the results just came out yesterday, and unanimously, although Chuk states numbers aren't out yet, we have a new constitution that increases the focus on Micronesian priorities and provides not a hand out, but a hand up to our citizens to ensure that when they leave the FSM, we can still provide for them, so that that burden doesn't fall on just Hawaii or Guam or any of the places that they end up. The reason why I say it's new, even though you don't see Chuk states numbers, is because the threshold to introduce an amendment is that we get more than 75% affirmative votes in at least 3 of the 4 states. And as you can see, Pohnpei, Yap, and Koshai unanimously passed all of the amendments above 75%. Next slide, please. So why is this important for all of you to understand? Well, the FSM as a federation is a loose federation, which means 100% of compact funds go to the states. Our state legislatures, our state workers are the ones who can appropriate funds to help our citizens wherever they are in the world. Next slide, please. And so if we want to increase the benefits for our citizens, it's one, understanding where they're coming from and their history, understanding where their country's priorities are, in spite of all of the news media that you see, in spite of all of the implicit bias that may exist. Understand that the ultimate goal for Micronesian community members is to go back home. It's to get the support that they needed and the support that was negotiated under the compact, but go home. Because citizenship in the FSM comes with land. If you are an FSM citizen, you have rights to land. The selling or buying of land is illegal in the FSM, so you can only get it by birthright. So if we create relationships, real relationships with the individuals, the communities, but also the governments back home, relationships between state organizations and leadership should be increased and maintained so that we can all support the provision of the basic necessities like housing, education, labor, healthcare, and the different freedoms of expression that will ultimately set the path for true self-determination. And that is when we can reclaim the fishing pole or identify whether we actually need a fishing pole or we should bring back our fishing nets. Next slide, please. So what can that look like on the ground? Helping FSM COFA migrants or all COFA migrants advocate for the accountability of the governments that we all work for. When Medicaid was taken, folks like the NAACP even advocated for it to be given back as a benefit to COFA migrants. So many people across Hawaii and the continent and even different countries internationally helped us get that back. Also, on the ground, there are real Micronesian community members and navigators helping to build healthier communities, as you will be able to read in this article published by Dina Sheck et al. Next slide, please. And with all of this, this is how we bring back, and this is how we help to grow the protective and resiliency factors that we know are inherent in our communities. Just as Lilinoe shared earlier, a lot of the risk factors are the ones that are the noisiest. If we can really see ourselves in each other's histories, in the ways that the US colonial administration has treated us all as immigrants, migrants, or indigenous peoples, we can see the protective resiliency factors that exist in us, in each other, and we can help bring that out through the work that we do in the community. And so that was all of the material that I wanted to share with everyone today, right at 11:11. Angel numbers are always a great sign. We're going to move into closing protocol. Thank you so much, everybody who made the time to stay. Again, all of these resources will be shared after this webinar. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask Jack to please come back and share about the Mana'o'io.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so essentially how this works is we're going to put the link in the chat. So if you go to this poll of link, what you can do is activate, well, not activate, but rather contribute one word that you took away from this entire training. And we'll see them populate on this screen like a word cloud. And so the bigger one word gets, the more responses it's received. And yeah, so we'll see the responses start to populate once you, the link, it is right here, Polev/Mapuna Lab 361, and you have to put the information or the word into that link. Okay, perfect. We're starting to get words. Truth, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. A lot of ones about knowledge. Carolann, you dropped some knowledge today. It's really impactful. We'd love to see it. Oh, okay, these are good. Culturally rich, absolutely. Oh, hope, oh, that makes me happy to see, so large. Much needed, very true. Oh, hope just keeps getting bigger. Oh my gosh, that makes me so happy to see. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for putting your words in, everyone. Feel free to keep doing that. It gives us great feedback. We love to see what you all thought of the training. There are other links to come where you can share more feedback, but with that, I'll turn it back to Carolann.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you so much, everyone, for your kind words and for the reflections of this webinar. I really, really hope that we all walk away at least with one of our cups filled of the 4 that we offered today. If you want to hear more about the lab and the webinar trainings that we've done in the past, please visit our Ulu State Disaster Response and also our Native Hawaiian Cultural Intervention trainings, both of which can be accessed through these links that will be provided in the slide deck when we sent it out. And they will also be they have also been provided by Kayla in the chat. Thank you, Kayla. We ask that everybody please fill out our feedback survey so that we can know how we can better serve all of you, what other trainings we can provide, what gaps in knowledge maybe we didn't fill here. They are required for those of you who want to receive continuing education credits, but we highly, highly recommend and ask that everybody fill this out so that we can become better trainers and better servers of you. I'm going to invite Kea to introduce her webinar for tomorrow.
Aloha mai kako. Oh, I am just sitting here in awe and just so impressed with your beautiful webinar that you've just done. Thank you so much. I want to invite all of you here to also attend, come and be with us tomorrow for our other webinar here. I don't even know what number we're on, I think 9. So this here is our Anchoring Culture and Substance Use Treatment and Prevention Models, the Curriculum Substance Use, our Reconnecting to Culture Part 2. And we'll be, our guest speaker will be Trevor Atkins, and that's tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 11:30. And there's a QR code and I believe a link in the chat as well. Mahalo, Carolann. I'm just
Mahalo, Kea.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. In closing, I have one more poem to share with you all as our final carry with, or our pule to end the day, or maybe start your day, depending on what time of the day it is for your work schedule. This poem is entitled O Micronesia Keia. If you joined any of our prior webinars, you may have heard it before. It was written to accompany our community mural project called Oceans of Reflection, which looks to find the connections between Hawaii and Micronesia so that we can continue to serve each other as long forgotten cousins of this ocean. O Micronesia Keia. As navigators, it is our destiny to at some point leave home in pursuit of opportunity to create for our descendants a better life than we've known. O Micronesia Keia, stories carried across oceans of fishermen who chase ririnmen, where we pound our food with coral and lava rocks and make magic potions. O Micronesia Keia, when ocean peoples become landlocked, we lose our depth perception. We can no longer see ourselves in ourselves, so we search for the oceans of reflection. O Micronesia Keia, we remember the story-laden garments we were taught to sew by Native Hawaiian missionaries into our mumu, uros, and skato. Losing sight of histories no longer etched in skin, blood once drawn in liberation, now quantified and weaponized to delegitimize and destabilize indigenous, sovereign nations. O Hawaii Keia, where navigation found its way home, Papa Mau reminding every single one of us of our shared kumulipo. O Hawaii Keia, where navigators find themselves off course, but together, just like the little goby, we can help each other return to our source. It is in community with each other where we learn how to tell our stories again, finding all the things we thought we'd lost mirrored in our new friends. Hands reaching across a canvas of orange and blue, our stories merged and emerged. Into each other's oceans, we found ourselves immersed. As tears turned watercolor, baptizing lenses in ancestral salt water, we found ourselves in each other. O Hawaii Keia, this is Hawaii, where we lay our heads at night, where we struggle to see ourselves in ourselves, so we look to our left and to our right. O Hawaii Keia, home of the Ahu that looks like bay, stone altar, mirrored across oceans in praise of Keakua, of Enilap, the struggles our ancestors endured the same. We are each other's liberation. Alive in this pai'aina, we will free each other again. Mahalo, kalangan lap, sulang, kulo, kiriso, and kamagar. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in the rest of our webinars. If anybody has any questions, we will stay on for a few more minutes. If anybody would like to discuss, everybody else, that was it. Thank you all so much.